Alright, so the first thing I'll do is approach the front of the vehicle and check my 3 L's. Okay? Any light, my lights, leans, and leaks. Okay? Now remember, you have 6 lights on the front of the tractor, 6 lights on the back of the tractor, and 6 lights on the back of the trailer. The first 3 of those 6 lights are always the same. Left, right, forward. Then on the front of the tractor you have low beam, high beam, and clearance. On the back of the tractor you have brake light, tail light, and reverse light. On the back of the trailer, brake light, tail light, clearance light, okay? So you always have 6 lights to check. Any leaning would indicate maybe a suspension problem. And leaks, of course, you lean down, look for any coolant or oil, okay? Then I would pop the hood. Now remember, you only have 4 things on the passenger side. You can spend the rest of the pre-trip on the driver's side. Okay, so the 4 things on the passenger side. I'll check my coolant level. I'll check my alternator, make sure it's properly mounted and secured. I'll check the belt of the alternator, make sure I have no more than 3/4 of an inch of slack. And I'll check my belt-driven water pump, make sure it's properly mounted, secure, and not leaking. I'm done on this side. Okay, now the 4 things on the engine on this side. I'll check my oil level. I'll check my power steering fluid level to my gear-driven power steering pump. You have to mention that the power steering pump's gear-driven. I'll check my gear-driven air compressor, make sure it's properly mounted and secured. And number 8, I'll check every hose for leaks. And you're done with your engine 8, okay? Working out from the engine, next I talk about my steering. I'm going to check every steering link component to make sure it has a castle nut and cotter pin, and the steering box is properly mounted and secured. Done with the steering. Directly below the steering, I go to my suspension, then my brakes, then my tires. Remember, 454. TBS, tires, brakes, suspension, but if you're working from the inside out, suspension, brake, and tires. Okay, I'll check my leaf springs, make sure nothing's cracked, broken, or missing. At the end of the springs, I'll check my spring mounts, make sure all the bolts are there. My U-bolts, again, properly mounted, secured. And my shock, properly mounted, secured, not leaking. I'm done with my 4 suspension parts. Now my 5 brake parts. I lean over the tire. Starting with the chamber, properly mounted, secure, no damage. On the right side of the chamber, I'll check the hose, make sure it's in good condition, no cracks, no leaks. On the left side of the chamber, I'll check the slack adjuster and push rod, make sure I have no more than an inch of slack. And then I'll lean over the tire to look at the lining of the drum, make sure I have no cracks or any blue color on the drum. Of course, blue color indicating that the drum got so hot at one point, it's now brittle, get rid of it. And the minimum thickness of my linings, I do have at least 1/4 inch, so I'm good. And last but not least, the 4 tire parts: rubber, rim, nut, and seal. Okay? Starting with the rubber, I talk about ICD, inflation, condition, and depth. I'll make sure the inflation is between 90 and 110. C is condition, so I'm going to look for any ABCs, abrasions, bulges, or cuts to the rubber. And the minimum depth on my steers, 4/30 seconds. Dropping down to the rim, I'll make sure there's no illegal welds or cracks. All my lug nuts are tight and present. If one was loose, I'd see a graphite streak. And last but not least, I'll check my hub oil seal. Again, on the steers, it's a hub seal. On the drives and the tandems, it's an axle seal. Okay, now the tough part's done. The rest is just walking down the side of the tractor. My mirrors, properly mounted, secured, no damage. I'll make sure my door functions properly and it has its weather strip. I'll check my TFM, turn signal, 4-way flasher, marker light. Make sure my steps are in good condition, properly mounted, secured. My fuel tank, I'll take the cap off, make sure it has its gasket. Then I'll lean down to make sure the tank is in good condition and not leaking. Okay. I can also check my equipment here on the outside. Okay, FET, fuses, extinguisher, and triangle. Again, the extinguisher should be 10 BC with a pin. Now I get to the catwalk. Catwalk area, I'll do my zigzag. Start at the top left. Okay, I see the exhaust. It appears to be properly mounted, secure, no leaks. I don't see any soot or carbon. When I go to the right, I go straight across. So I'll check the lights and reflectors on top of the trailer. Back to the left, I'll check the reflective tape on the back of the tractor in case I'm bobtailing. Then I'll check the header board and make sure there's no cracks or damage. Then I'll check my air and electric lines, make sure they're in good condition, no leaks. Okay. Right there's the catwalk. I can see it's properly mounted secured. Under the catwalk, I'll check all 3 sections of my drive shaft. Remember, drive shafts are balanced when they come from the factory. Maybe a rock flies up and dings it, you'll start to get some serious vibration. So always be aware of any vibration if something happened to your drive shafts. Right here I can see the frame rail. There's no illegal welds, cuts, or drill holes. Okay, there's actually a sticker on the frame rail telling you what not to do to the frame rail. Okay. Then I'll come to the fifth wheel area. I just remember the numbers 45. I have 4 things to talk about on the fifth wheel area. Okay. Number 1, I'll make sure the mounting bolts hold the platform to the frame. Number 2, if the release arm is in, that means the locking jaws are around the shank of the kingpin. Number 3, I should have no gap between the apron and the fifth wheel plate. And since this is a sliding fifth wheel, I have to talk about number 4. I'll make sure the pins are in their holes, and I have the proper clearance between the back of the tractor and the landing gear. Because again, if your fifth wheel is slid all the way forward, there's a possibility that the landing gear can rub against the tractor on a 90-degree turn. Okay. Now coming to this axle, remember we already talked about the steer axle, so again I have to remind myself, TBS. I can see the tires, but I have to remind myself that I have to talk about the brakes and the suspension behind that tire. Okay, so all I remember there are the numbers 113. Okay, there's 1 difference in this tire, 1 difference in these brakes, and 3 extra things on the suspension. Okay, so I can say to the instructor, I'll check these tires exactly like the steers. The only difference is I'll check my axle seal. I'll check these brakes exactly like the steers. The only difference is I have an extra air hose to check. As far as the suspension, on the steers we said we had 4 parts, MUSS, mount tube bolt springs and shocks. We have those back here, but we also have to check the airbags, the airbag mounts, and the torsion bars. Okay. I'll check my mud flat, make sure it's 10 by 10, 10 inches away from the tire, 10 inches off the ground. My landing gear, I'll make sure it's in good condition, no damage, and it functions properly. Right here I can check the 6 lights on the back of the tractor. Left, right, 4-way, brake light, tail light, reverse light. Okay, at this point, I'll proceed to the middle of the trailer. When I get to this mid-light, I'm going to stop. I'll talk about the side of the trailer, make sure there's no damage. Make sure I have all my reflective tape. I'll make sure this light functions as a TFM, turn signal, 4-way flasher and marker light. At this point, I'll lean down and look at the frame of the trailer. I'm going to check all the cross members, make sure they're in good condition, which they are. And then I'll proceed back further. I'll check these air and electric lines, make sure they're at least 18 inches off the ground, which they are. Okay, now here we go, the trailer axle, TBS. I have to talk about the tires, the brakes, and the suspension. And this, again, since I have a Form 4, I can say to the instructor, I'll check these tires exactly like the drives. I'll check these brakes exactly like the drives. As far as the suspension, this particular model trailer only has airbags, airbag mounts, and shocks, okay? Now I'll proceed on to my tandem release. It is in the lock position because the release arm is in and I can see the 2 pins sticking out of their holes. Okay, everybody see the 2 pins? Yes. My mud flap, I'll make sure it's 10 by 10. This one's low because the air is not in the trailer. Yeah, I'll make sure I have my hooks. I'll check the ABS light to make sure it functions properly. Then on the back of the trailer, I'll check the doors to make sure they function properly. The doors have their ties. I'll make sure I have all my reflective tape, and I'll check my 6 lights. Left, right, 4-way, brake light, tail light, clearance light. And then I'll check the other side of the tractor and trailer just like I checked this side. And that completes a Form 4 pre-trip.